Okay, today we're going to talk about Marxist criticism, which is a literary critical perspective. First, I want to talk a little bit about Karl Marx. Obviously, he is the one who Marxism is named for. So Marx was born in 1818 and died in 1883 in what was at then the Kingdom of Prussia, which is kind of present-day Germany. So he was Prussian, though he did have to leave and became stateless later in his life, kind of due to his political work. He was a historian and a philosopher, right? He was also a journalist, but he's best known really as a philosopher. So Marxism, probably the place to start with Marxism is the idea of historical materialism. And historical materialism is the idea that history is the result of material conditions rather than ideals. To put it simply, the way history develops and the way things change has to do with things that happen, the actual material conditions on the ground, the way society is structured, the way people's lives are affected. This is in contrast to other ideas. For example, we could look at American history and say that America was founded on the belief of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those beliefs, the beliefs in those rights, have been what have affected history ever since. Marx would disagree with that because he believed that history is actually due to the material conditions, not the more abstract ideals, rights, and that sort of thing. And he mainly saw those material conditions in socio and economic terms. Most importantly is the mode of production, and he spoke of, or he wrote about three modes of production: feudalism, which is the kind of the era leading up to the end of the 18th century; capitalism, which we are still in now, sometimes called late stage capitalism or advanced capitalism; and finally communism. He used the terms communism and socialism interchangeably. So feudalism, as you probably know from your history class, is where we have an agricultural system that is ruled by the nobility. The nobility get their right to rule based on divine right, right? The church selects them for it, and it's passed down through family and that sort of thing. And so in the feudal system, there were lords who had the divine right to rule, and they would kind of lease out land to vassals, and vassals were people, kind of military members who would then kind of rule smaller portions of land that they did not own, that they traded their military use for. And those vassals had serfs who would live on that land and work that land, and they really had no choice. It was certainly a system where serfs were exploited for their labor. But that ended, and we moved into a system dominated by capitalism. And again, this is the system we live in now. So with capitalism, we get the idea of capital, and capital is anything that has value. And something that has value in a capitalist system is something you can trade, something you can trade for things, other things of value. Specifically in this time, we get money, which is kind of the symbolic representation of those things that have value. Now, we also get the idea of property and individual ownership of property. Whereas before, in a feudal society, everything was owned by the lords. In a capitalist society, individuals have the ability to own property. Now, Marx would have divided people up into two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And the bourgeoisie are the property owners. These are the middle and upper class people. They own the means of production, he would say, whereas the proletariat do the production. All they have, the thing that the proletariat has of value is their labor. They don't own things. They don't have property in the same way that bourgeoisie do. And we see this in our own country. We have different classes, the property owners and the working class, the people who trade their labor for other things of value, mainly necessities to live, whether it be food or shelter, transportation, those types of things. And we find that the proletariat have a hard time building wealth. Anyway, Marx predicted an end to capitalist societies, that they, much like the feudal societies that ended with the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution in England, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, that kind of ended those feudal societies. He predicted capitalist societies would end as well, and then evolve into communist societies, communist or socialist. And in the way Marx talked about it, and he did not actually write a whole lot about communist societies because they had not come to pass. He said in these societies, the proletariat would own the means of production. So in our kind of the world we live in, you sometimes see co-ops, and a co-op is a company that's owned by the workers. That's an example of a socialist or communist idea. And that's what Marx predicted would happen with everything. Now, he didn't predict the kind of authoritarian communist societies that we're used to, whether it be the Soviet Union or Maoist China. He certainly, if you read his writings, he wouldn't have supported Stalinism or anything like that. But instead, would have called like the end goal like a stateless communism, because the state is part of a coercive force. So, okay. At the base of it all, though, the thing that causes change is class struggle. That within feudalist and capitalist societies, you have the stratification of people who use power over other people and exploit others. And because of that, you have that class struggle. And the class struggle is what spurs on change and revolution. So, how do we apply this to literary criticism? Very simply, we look at the relationship between class and power. And we see it in all kinds of literature all the time, because literature is a reflection of the world that it's written in, and it's necessarily inescapable. You can't write a piece of literature that is not in some way affected by the society that it was written in. So, what kinds of questions would a Marxist literary critic ask? And there's a bunch here. Whom does it benefit if the work or effort is accepted, successful, believed, etc.? What is the social class of the author? Which class does the work claim to represent? What values does it reinforce? What values does it subvert? What conflict can be seen between the values the work champions and those it portrays? What social classes do the characters represent? And finally, how do characters from different classes interact or conflict? And so the Marxist literary critic will look at these and ask these questions when he or she is analyzing a piece of literature. And using the answers to these questions, as well as others and other analysis, we'll come to conclusions about what a piece of literature does, how it presents groups of people in different classes, and what kind of that literature says about power and economics. All right. We will continue with Marxist literary criticism later this week. I hope you've enjoyed the video.